Welcome. First and foremost, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. My name is Andrea. I will be your host. I'm with Inspire Advantage. With me, I have my colleague Madison, who will be introducing herself momentarily. And we are a very small part of this large machine, Inspire Advantage. So tonight, we're here to talk about everything you need to know about PA school and what that actually looks like. But before we do that, just a couple of housekeeping rules, so to speak. This webinar is recorded. That's always the number one question we get. So it is recorded. You will receive a recording in your inbox within a day or two. What are we talking about tonight? What points are we talking about? Why are we here tonight? So three main topics. We want to do a comprehensive application breakdown, making sure you really do know everything about the application process. We want to talk a little bit about school selection tips and then go into mastering PA school interviews and what that looks like, followed by a Q&A. With that being said, we always leave some time in two places. So we have a midway check-in, and then we have a check-in towards the end where we go through your questions. So no question is too big, too small for us and our more so Madison to answer. But if I can answer, of course, I will myself. But yeah, we want to make sure that we get all your questions answered, and we're here to provide you with the most support and the most valuable information. So who are we? Again, we're Inspire Advantage. We're a globally recognized admissions consulting and test prep firm with about 15, 16 years of experience. We specialize in helping students gain top admission to graduate healthcare programs such as PA school with a 94% acceptance rate. This is something we're extremely proud of. We believe in really starting this process as early as possible, which is why we offer something called pre-health advising for college freshmen. Our team helps students build a tailored academic timeline, including course selection and GPA strategy, find impactful experiences like research, shadowing, clinical and non-clinical, volunteering, extracurriculars, leadership roles, et cetera, et cetera. We help students make their application stand out from the rest with a stellar personal statement and interview prep. These steps lay a strong foundation for our students and applicants to leave a lasting impression. So in addition, our tutors do provide personalized one-on-one test prep. We offer diagnostic tests, custom study plans, and interim process tracking. And we always see a student's score increase no matter what the test is. So for example, if it was the MCAT, we have an average of 15-point increase for 45 plus hours of studying. Our GRE has a score guarantee of 320 for all of our programs. So when it's time to actually apply, our all-inclusive application process, or program I should say, offers unlimited support through the entire application process. So this includes creating a personalized narrative and school list, perfecting personal statements and secondary essays with unlimited edits, including interview prep, scholarship guidance, waitlist strategies, et cetera, et cetera. We're very much by our student side through the entire process until they receive their acceptance. Our goal is very simple, it's very clear. It's to create the most competitive candidates in application, ensuring our students really do shine and stand out in a competitive landscape. If you'd like to learn more, we do offer personalized consultations via video, phone, or email. No matter where you are in the application process, we're here to help, we're here to support you. You know a little bit about us, I'd love to pass it over to Madison to introduce herself and then get on with tonight's presentation.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Madison. I graduated PA school in 2022, and I'm currently working in my first job right now as an orthopedic trauma surgery PA at Yale. So I'm really excited to speak with you guys. I have been really passionate about mentoring ever since I was in undergrad, and I think that it's a great tool that we have for a really competitive process, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about it. So I'm just going to go to the next slide. So the first thing is just basically crafting a standout CASPA profile. So if you guys haven't already started opening up the CASPA website and getting familiar with the application, I would highly recommend doing that because it can be pretty daunting with all the different sections that there are in the CASPA profile itself. And every section really does matter because you're trying to create overall why you're a competitive applicant in every single one of the sections. And so planning for your admission to PA school, I think really isn't something that can happen in a matter of months, because there may not be areas that you realize that they're looking at and wanting to see on that application unless you actually are going through and taking a look and seeing what makes up that CASPA application. That way you can prepare about a year out in advance and get some more experience in some of these other areas that you may not have. So let's go to the next slide. So basically, we'll start with the personal statement. So writing an unforgettable personal statement is, pretty important. It isn't just going to be about your story, but it's also going to be about who you are and why they should take a chance on you versus another applicant. So basically, you want to showcase experiences in that personal statement that is going to make that program think that you're going to be a good physician assistant. And you, rather than saying, oh, I have good team working, I'm good with interpersonal skills, and I'm good at, time management, showcasing examples of this and actually showing, why you're a compassionate healthcare, why you would be a compassionate healthcare provider is going to be really important. And then tying that all together in a bow at the end. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So mastering the experience section. So going on and talking about experiences, this is where I'm saying, if you go and you look at the CASPA application, on the drop-down section in your experiences, I think you're going to have several categories. It's going to be non-healthcare employment, extracurricular, healthcare experience, leadership experience, patient care experience, research, shadowing, teaching experience, and volunteer. I really encourage all the students that I work with personally to try to have something in all of those categories, because I think that having something in each one of those sections really showcases how you're a well-rounded applicant. They wouldn't have those headers on there unless it wasn't somewhat important to them to see that in certain students. Not saying that everybody needs to have research experience on their application. There's a lot of applicants that don't, but if you have an ability to, join a research lab and get some experience and be able to put something in that section, that's awesome. Or if you're able to tutor some students or lead, a science group and be able to add that into teaching experience, all of those things are only going to help make you a more dynamic applicant and are going to be really important to put into helping make sure you get accepted to a PA program. So quality over quantity. Don't list experiences just to fill up your application. Try to have something in that each one of those sections, but make it meaningful. Think about roles that are actually going to showcase to them, why you're a good applicant. And it doesn't always have to be medical related. It can also be the fact if you are, an intramural soccer team and you're the captain of that team, there's many things that you can write underneath that to showcase abilities that, you have to have in that setting that are also going to translate to healthcare. So that's something to constantly be thinking about. There's also some of us that have to work while we're going to college, and those showcases another side of us as well. So keep that in mind when you're writing these things down, that not everything has to be medical, and look for something that can show an ability that you're bringing to that program in every single thing that you put on your application. Volunteer work is really important too. I encourage every single one of my applicants to go help out in underserved communities, not only because it's a huge reason why we're all becoming mid-level providers is to increase access to healthcare, but it also showcases, your ability to, you just grow so much more in your cultural competency and your diversity, equity, inclusion skills. And those are all things that you have to have as a healthcare provider and that they're going to teach you into PA school. But if you can already start out with coming into PA school with that underneath your belt, that experience, that's only going to make you a stronger applicant. So volunteering at your local, hospitals in any ways that they need, or, homeless shelters, all of those things are great for volunteer experience. Shadowing hours, so making them count. So to strengthen your CASP application. So something that every student should look up is basically the average kind of hours that other applicants are putting on their application. And I think a lot of programs out there now are, one of the requirements of a lot of them that I've seen is to have a minimum of 100 hours shadowing a PA. So knowing that going in, if that is the standard for a lot of PA programs, that's something that you should probably already be reaching for right now. Because what a lot of programs will ask themselves is, if the student hasn't showcased in their application that they have any real exposure to PAs, how do they know this is for sure the profession that they want to go into? So those shadowing hours, specifically getting at least 100 hours of shadowing a PA, is, in my opinion, one of the most vital aspects to your application to really support that what the PA profession is about. You've worked with PAs and you know that you want to do this. So make those hours count. Make sure you are shadowing a PA. Leadership roles really matter as well. I think that, again, this can be just leading a peer-led study group. This could be mentoring students at your school. This could be, a myriad of things, but leadership is something that every single school is going to be looking for. So that's one of the sections on that experience profile that you absolutely want to have something filled out for. And a few things that are meaningful, because healthcare providers, that's a quality that all of us have to be good clinicians. So really make sure that you are being thoughtful about the leadership experience section. And, it takes a while to brainstorm some of these things. It's hard to just write this application. So what I would recommend doing is starting a Microsoft Word document and putting all of these categories on there and starting to try to brainstorm what you've done underneath any of them to get started. And we're at the check-in.
So I know we just gave you a ton of information, which is really great, but I want to just take a moment to let all of that sink in. If you have any questions thus far, please put them in the chat. If you don't, no worries. We have that other additional Q&A towards the end. So just as a little thank you for having us here, we're super excited. We love doing these sort of more intimate and more exclusive webinars. So for being here, we'd love to offer you a 10% off discount for any sort of one of our programs, 10 off web. As well, if you scan that QR code, it actually takes you back to a page where you're able to book a free consultation, where you're actually able to sit down with one of our admissions counselors and really get those questions answered. So if you have a particular situation, or you'd like to sort of learn more about the process, or you have a question about a school, or if there's anything that we can offer, we wanted to make those free consultations available to this fine group as well. I don't see any questions in the chat thus far. So Madison, I think we can keep going, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, awesome. So common CASPA application mistakes. So the first one is talking about basically, rushing your application, which is kind of something I'm talking about. So don't stress if you are applying this round and you haven't been preparing in advance, but just know that you're in a good position if you are preparing for the next cycle a year in advance, because someone as myself who did have to take a gap year because I was trying to rush my application, I hope that makes you feel a little bit better knowing that it does just take some time to plan these things out. And the sooner you start in advance, the better, because if you don't have things underneath some of these categories that you know that they're looking for to make you a well-rounded applicant, it takes time to get those experiences and to build them up and to get the number of hours that you're looking for. For example, if, there's a lot of PA schools that are requiring upwards of 2,500 hours of direct patient care. You can't get that in a matter of months, right? It takes time. So don't rush your application. Really make sure you're aware of what other people are putting forth, because it's so competitive to get into PA school. You want to know, okay, what is the average hours that other students are putting forth in these categories, so that you know how you're matching up against them whenever you are being compared to all of these other students when they're reading your application. And then starting to build up in those areas that you are a little bit weaker in, or don't maybe have you're not quite hitting the average hours in. And then overlooking programs for specific requirements. This is a big one because, it costs money to apply to each one of the programs that you're applying to. And so often I think people can make the mistake of not going through everything with a fine tooth comb. And some school might have an odd requirement that says, they require this course that isn't a normal science prerequisite, and you overlook that, and then you end up paying the application fee, and you're automatically disqualified because you just don't meet their minimum requirement. So it's really, really important that when you do finalize your total list of schools, that you go through their website with a fine tooth comb. You're not just trusting what you're seeing through CASPA, but you're actually going to that program's website and you're looking to make sure, do you meet all of the program requirements? Do you have the GPA that they're telling you that you need to have? Because I will tell you that some other programs will say that you need to meet a minimum GPA for their prerequisites, which means that you have to recalculate your GPA, like your prerequisite GPA for that program. And you don't want to apply to a program where maybe you're going to get disqualified because of that. So just really make sure you're paying attention to that, because that's a mistake that people can make. And then the other thing that I'll just say is that apply to programs also that, everybody's going to have top programs that they're going to want to apply to. And I always encourage my applicants to apply to those programs, because you never know, you might have something that school is looking for. But also make sure that you're doing your research and you're applying to programs where the statistics of the students that are getting in, you match up with those students, so that you increase your chances of getting into those programs. And that it takes a lot of research. And when I meet with my applicants, there is a tool that I have that I won't plug on here, but there is a tool that I think is particularly helpful in researching all of these schools that I use. It's not an Inspira-based tool, but it's something I used when I was applying in, because it can be daunting when there's, 200 plus PA programs in the US and you're trying to kind of narrow down which schools you're going to apply to and which ones you're going to have the best chance of getting into. But that is something that I think is a huge thing that needs to not be overlooked, because it is so competitive. You want to make sure you're really applying to schools that not only your top programs, but programs that you think they are going to have a good chance of getting into. And then don't undervalue the personal statement. I think everybody knows that this is a big part, but I would just say, don't rush this. I would say use everything you've learned in your writing classes. And if you did take the GRE, all the tools that you learned when you were learning how to craft essays to ace that section of the GRE, use that. Make sure that you're wrapping everything up in a fine tooth, like you're in a fine bow at the end. Listing really impactful experiences and that showcase why you're going to be a good provider, and not just telling them. And, making sure it flows. I think that the mark of a good personal statement is always having something that kind of says, this is when I wanted to be a PA and why I know this, and things that you want to put out. What qualities do I want them to take away from this? And you should have other people be able to proofread your personal statement and at the end of it, tell you the main points and takeaways. And if somebody can't regurgitate that back to you, then that tells you that the readers at these PA programs are probably not going to be able to do that either. And you want to leave a lasting impact, because I can tell you, my faculty members still remembered some of our personal statements. Don't let that be daunting. I know it can be really daunting to write this paper about yourself, but really think about, this is the chance that you have a voice to show them things that they're not going to be able to just find by reading your experience section. This is a unique experience that maybe showcases how you were a good advocate, for example, and shows them that what a PA does. Maybe you saw a PA advocating for a patient with, that had a Jehovah's Witness patient and coming up with a different treatment plan that really respected them and their religious beliefs. Say that this is a part of your application where you really get to showcase things that you can't necessarily showcase as well in the experience sections. But if I didn't say this earlier, I'm going to say it now. In the experience sections and all the CASPA, you have comment sections in the boxes, and I don't know how many characters that you have. They change it. But I always encourage all of my students that I work with to use every single one of the characters that they're giving you, because they read them. The faculty members read them. And so don't just list out, everything you did in each experience section, but also list out, maybe close it with a line that says, from this really cemented my desire to be a PA because of this. Like, really take every single opportunity to showcase through every other part of your application why you're a competitive applicant. I see so many people not fill out all the sections in those comment boxes, and it's a missed opportunity, in my opinion, to tell the school everything you did. You can always come up with something, even if I'm putting down my, non-healthcare experience of whenever I was in college and having to, work at a restaurant to make money to pay for my college, there's still many skills I can talk about in there, that translate even now to my job: quick math, teamwork, there's all these other things. The fact that I was promoted after, a period of time, I'm listing all of that in a really meaningful way in the comment section. So don't lose sight of that, because that's something that can really give your application an edge. And I think that that's something that I often catch people are not really filling out that comment section and underneath all of the experiences. School selection tips. So we talked about this. So evaluating program fit. So basically, yeah, you're going to have your top programs, but making sure that you are also applying to ones that you think that you're going to have a high chance of, getting accepted to, and considering, requirements. Some people don't have the, I know there's a few students of mine that hadn't taken the GRE, and so they were looking for, schools that didn't require that specifically. So make sure that you are, evaluating the program and the fit. And I will tell you, something that I also think is important is looking up that program's accreditation. So I will advise my students to not, apply to programs necessarily that are not accredited or maybe having some problems going on, because that can put you at risk if you're in the program of not being able to practice once you complete the program. So it's important to look at the accreditation status of that school. It's important to think about if you align with what that program's mission is, and to make sure that you're applying to ones where you have similar statistics to students that they accepted in the prior years. And then there are a lot of other factors that you can look to beyond the rankings. I know that there's some that offer benefits for students that necessarily that maybe they want to go into primary care. And I know that that was something that one of my program was actually talking about doing, was kind of an incentive for students that were going to do some work in primary care or underserved communities, specifically right following after their graduation date. And so I think that there's programs out there that are doing that. And that if that's something that that you want to do and you're interested in, that could make you more competitive for those schools. So this slide is looking for programs with a high PANCE pass rate. So this kind of goes into what I was talking about in terms of just like checking out accreditation status. All of that will kind of come up on those websites. The ARC-PA is who manages that. If you want to look that up, you can see a list of all of the programs on their website. The other thing that I would think about is that there are some PA programs out there. I know that there's a few in Texas where the PA students, from what I understand, were required to basically find their clinicals to a certain extent. And I know for myself, that would have been very challenging for me during the rigorous PA program curriculum to like try to worry about finding my own clinical rotations. And so knowing what I know now about PA school, I probably would not have applied to a program where the students were going to be kind of required to find some of their clinicals. So that's something that I would also kind of look into as well, and just make sure because there are PA schools out there that they need their students to kind of help. And I think that is a little bit more challenging and not something that I would have wanted personally for myself. But if that is something that you're interested in, then you can certainly go that route, but I would keep those things in mind. Key questions. Okay, so yeah, so the PANCE pass rate, most programs, when you go there, I will say a lot of programs also offer webinars such as this. And I would actually look into attending some of those, because I will tell you, like my faculty, so I was on the admissions interview committee at my faculty when I was in PA school there. And so I got some insight. And one thing I learned is that these webinars that these faculty members hold for some of these PA programs, they actually are, taking attendance and looking at what students are attending these. And so you can sometimes get, just your name out there by going to these presentations, asking questions, and also remembering that PA programs faculty isn't always like a large number of people. So the very people that are hosting these webinars might be your professors one day, and just it's a much smaller community that you may realize. And so actually showing your face, showing up to these things, going in person, if they have, Q&As in person, some of the programs do that. That's a really big thing that you can kind of put a good foot forward going into the new application cycle. And one of the things they always talk about is their PANCE pass rate. And I think it is something that's important because all of us will have to eventually pass the PANCE. But I would say most programs, I think, do a pretty good job of that, the accredited programs. How many clinical rotation sites are available, that kind of is what we talked about. Also, what specialties. And I think it's also important to ask programs. I know I applied to a couple of programs that were out of state whenever I was applying, and they had told me that they only let applicants do, or their students do, rotations in that state, which was a little bit of a deterrent for me because since I was going out of state, I probably wanted to eventually practice in where I was from. I would have away rotations would have been really appealing to me, but that was something that program did not offer their students to do as an option. And so that's something to keep in mind too, is that if you are applying to programs that are out of state, will they let you do an away rotation back at where you're from that could help you get your foot in the door for when you graduate? And then what kind of academic and emotional support? I think this is huge also. And just, you will, I had a great experience in my class program. I do think that all of us kind of came together, and it's great to have your classmates, but I think also having an emotional support system at home is important as well. And if you have a spouse, or family members that rely on you, kind of talking about and planning for these ahead of time, like PA school, and who's going to kind of how the responsibilities will shift, and what kind of support you're going to need during those 2 to 2.5 years of PA school is really important to have those kind of conversations and finding out what support your program has. My program had a system in place to where the students in the class above us, we were partnered with them. And so we had a mentor in them. And that was something that I really loved about my program. We had a faculty mentor and we also had a student mentor. And I think that was monumental to my success in PA school. So look and see if any of the programs that you're applying to also have that built in, because I think that's huge. Other opportunities for leadership, research, or community engagement. Yeah, ask all of those questions too. And I think the rotations that they offer, again, just going back to that, is a big deal because I know a lot of my classmates ended up getting jobs from those rotations. And so just see if they have those rotations. And if you're looking for a specific specialty that might be harder to get into, for say orthopedics, sometimes can be a little bit competitive. So can derm, I would find, and if you know that those are the specialties you want to go into, I would make sure that your program has availability for you guys to all be able to do those clinical rotations. Mastering PA school interviews. So preparation is key. I cannot stress that enough. I think, sometimes people convince themselves that you cannot study for a multiple mini interview. That's a type of interview that there is, and you absolutely can. I think that preparation is the way to stay calm and collected when you're going into these interviews. And what I always kind of the biggest tip that I give my students that I work with is to basically have a set of note cards and have some narratives of stories and examples, kind of like you're doing throughout your application, of what you want that school to take away from you when you're there in front of them in the interview, because they're going to have so many other people there and hearing all these different questions. You want to have really well-crafted answers that you already have in the back of your head that you can pull out and weave into pretty much any question that they're asking you. And it's going to increase your confidence. And also it's going to be a very powerful thing that you're putting forward. And it's going to leave a lasting impression because you want them to be able to say, oh, I remember that student's name when they're looking back through all the interviewees and saying, oh yeah, I do. They had this story or that story. And that really stood out to me. So practicing all of those. The other thing that's huge is, I know it sounds, silly, but practicing in front of recording yourself or a family member. There's things that I do that, I didn't even realize that I do sometimes until I was actually recording it and watching it back. So really preparing for that and putting your best foot forward, your professional appearance is huge. And I will tell you, since I was on the interview committee, something that other students, the interviewees may not think about is that from the moment that you get there till the moment that you leave, you have eyes on you and you're being watched. And they're not only looking at you and how you're dressing and how you're delivering your answers in front of the interviewers, but they're also looking how you're interacting with the other students that are at that interview. Are you talking about the questions, which, is not allowed? Are you, being friendly? Are you being inclusive? All of those things you really are, being watched. So not being on your phone and just being very present and being very well prepared and very friendly is kind of one of the best ways to succeed at the interviews as well. Build rapport, make a lasting impression, and handling challenging questions. So I will just say, there's going to be curveball questions almost at every, you can't prepare for every question, but I think that when you practice the multiple mini interviews, so that's basically, let's say my school did that style and it was 8 different rooms. I couldn't prepare for any of those, but there's lots of mock interviews that will simulate those. And just seeing how you are able to handle each one of those curveballs that kind of get thrown on you beforehand in going to these interviews will help you prepare for that. And if you have these narratives that I encourage all of my students, and I practice with them over and over in these mock interviews to have before you go in, then it doesn't knock your confidence down all that low if you feel like you didn't do so well with the question, because you know that you have these other answers in the back of your pocket that you can pull out and weave into other questions, so that the interviews are still going to know who you are and you're still going to leave a lasting impression, even if you didn't know the best thing to say to one question. But really getting better at answering hard, challenging questions is a skill that comes from practicing people giving you questions that you don't know and having to answer them in the moment. So practice is everything. I do several mock interviews with my students before they go to the interviews because it really is a huge, huge opportunity at that point to make a lasting impression. And then showcasing your skills. We talked about this. So talking about volunteer experience. The other thing that I will tell you is making sure you align with your program. So when you're doing your general CASPA application, it's very hard to tailor your application to each one of these programs, right? But when you're doing secondary applications or when you're at an interview, you should absolutely know that program's mission statement and their values going into there. And even researching who the director of the program is and things like that. You should have that down like the back of your hand, because you are going to have to be able to speak specifically to why you're a good fit for that program. They want just as much as, they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them. So make sure, you're applying to schools that you want to go to. And then the ones that you do pick, make sure that you are really able to articulate that in a meaningful way to them when you're there at these interviews of why their school specifically is where you want to go. I know for me with UT Southwestern, there was a lot of their PAs that I had actually gotten to work with. And something that I had voiced at my interviews is that I had seen the sort of PAs that their program had produced, and that those were the types of providers that I wanted to emulate. And so that was something that really stood out to me about that program. And that's why I wanted to go to UT Southwestern, one of the many reasons I wanted to go there. But think about that. Think about those lasting things that are going to tell them why specifically that's the school you want to go to. And then leave a memorable impression, always be humble, always be kind, and just be, positive. Don't be too hard on yourself, and really try to relax and stay calm. And I find that preparing is the best way to do that, because the more that you're able to stay calm, the better you're going to be able to put your best foot forward and shake it off if you do get a question that's a little bit more challenging. And then avoid generic responses. So kind of just the example that I had just given is I don't know many other people that were probably giving an answer that was that similar to me. That was a personal experience that I had working with these PAs that had come from their program. So really think about what kind of sets you apart, and then, looking to see, challenges. I would say 2 questions that I think everybody needs to have the answer to going into a PA school interview is, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And your weaknesses should always be something that you can put a positive spin on. And those questions are every PA school interview that I attended and everyone that my students have attended, that has been a question in some form, one or another. So, and the ability to talk about that in a very articulate and meaningful way and showcase how maybe you've turned a weakness actually into a strength is very powerful in an interview. So, I think that, for example, I think whenever I was applying, one of my weaknesses that I had talked about was my, ability to overcommit myself sometimes because I was so passionate and I wanted to be involved in so many different things that I had a tendency to spread myself too thin. And, I came up with, things that to combat that and that I've learned from, and I turned it into a growth opportunity for myself. So really think about that weakness answer and how you can change that to make them realize that it's actually a strength and a growing process, or something that you've grown from, and it's going to be make you a better person. All right. So, and then personal statement, start with a compelling opening. We talked about this already. I think that, basically, I see some questions coming through. I don't know if you want me to save those until the end, but I'm happy to answer them now.
Yeah, let's answer them now.
Okay. Where did it go? So no, you can't. You can't have notes during the interview, but that's where I will tell you, I think the best thing you can do is have a few note cards where you're writing your narrative on them. And I'll tell you a secret is that I took those note cards that I had with me to my interview when I was very nervous in the bathroom of the interview, getting ready to go in and answer questions. I took these note cards out really quickly and refreshed my memory of these narratives that I knew that I wanted to put forth at my program that I was interviewing at, because it is very nerve-wracking sometimes. And you can't have note cards with you. So you can't be reading them out there with the faculty, but I would absolutely stash them on your person and bring something back to kind of help calm yourself down, but have those answers really, really, really well prepared. And that will help you. Just remembering who you are and who you want them to know that you are at that interview. When it comes to interviews, yes, you can. So I don't remember if they will directly speak to that and tell you in the interview. I don't think that they'll tell you the style per se, but you can look it up online and see. And it's very, like I said, you're not able to, like, I think you sign a disclosure. You're not able to talk about the interview questions at the interview, but you can learn the style, and the style is very important. So multiple mini interview is one of the styles that I was talking about. Basically, it's a style of 8 different stations that you go to, and really you don't know what's going to happen at each station. Maybe they're asking you to pick out, answer a question about a research article. Maybe they're asking you to look at a couple of photos and decide, what could be wrong with some of the photos you're looking at. Maybe they're asking you to instruct somebody on how to put together a toy airplane. It really could be anything, but they're looking for specific skills that you have, leadership skills and things like that, in each one of those sections. And I think kind of remembering that when you're doing that is like, okay, what could they be looking for? And how do I, put my best foot forward in this situation? And then they take like the best. I know my program specifically, they threw out the highest of the 8 stations and the lowest of the 8 stations. And they basically averaged all of the other ones together. And so that's just one example, but the format of the interview, it matters a lot. And then, is it considered inappropriate to showcase intimate patient connections? For instance, if the school thought maybe it showed you were too involved. Can you just, Elizabeth, tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that question?
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. I see there's a couple of other questions coming into the chat. While Elizabeth gets her questions in, I think we can continue on with the presentation and then come back. I see Giovanni has a question as well. So,
okay. So going back to, so the mock interview. So this is exactly what we're talking about. So mock interview. So I do this with my students. Once we know where they're applying, where they got interviews to, we see, is it going to be a group interview? Is it going to be a multiple mini? Is it going to be a one-on-one? And then we try to prepare for those accordingly. But preparation is key. You know, once you get your application, it's never too early to start preparing, in my opinion, because sometimes schools will send you an invitation to interview and you're interviewing in 2 weeks. And personally, sometimes I don't think that's enough time to really, you know, have somebody practice several mock interviews with you. And that's your only shot, you know, is that interview. So I would start preparing as soon as you submit your CASPA applications and really make sure you have those narratives down on those note cards, because if you have narratives down and things that you know you want to showcase, you can really leave those any question they're going to ask you. Common mistakes. So overlooking deadlines. So I will say this is the biggest one that I did. This is why I had to it was my second time applying because I didn't realize how quickly everything came up. So look at the deadlines, know your deadlines. And I will tell you that most PA programs are rolling admissions. So that means that whoever gets their application in first is the one whose application is getting looked at first. And so that increases your chance of getting an acceptance or an interview invitation to that program. So I tell the students that I'm working with that 2 to 3 weeks after the CASPA deadline, or the CASPA application cycle opens, they have applications submitted. Now there's secondary applications that come in and things like of that nature. And maybe there's a couple scenarios where maybe they can't submit, but I really try to make it to where we avoid all of that. The letters of recommendation, the people that are writing that are well aware far in advance, because that's another thing that can hold up your CASPA application, because they are only allowed to send that once CASPA opens. But 2 to 3 weeks after is kind of my max, because really being on that front end of the first cycle of applications that these schools are looking at, I think exponentially increases your chances of getting an interview. The other thing is to seek input on your application interview prep for mentors. I think it really is so key to speak to people who are already PAs. I think that, you know, that's why I'm so passionate about helping people, because there was PAs that helped me, you know, that I shadowed and worked with and gave me advice. And I think that it's such a competitive process, but it's such a fulfilling career. And I'm so passionate about being PA, and I love being a PA. And it's an amazing job in healthcare, but that's why it's so competitive. And I think it really does help to have somebody that has been through this whole process that is PA school and applying to kind of help give you some pointers and some tips. So make sure you're reaching out in your community. Make sure you're taking advantage of people that are coming to speak in your pre-PA societies and things like that, and great companies like Inspira that are trying to help people get accepted.
With that being said, we would love your help now. The QR code goes back to a questionnaire. It's about 4 or 5 questions long, totally optional. We just want to hear from you. We want to hear what you liked, what areas of improvement. We take all of this information back, and we just hope to better our sessions and continue doing more of these. So that's really what this is about. Madison, there's a ton of questions in the chat, which makes me really happy. So let's address Elizabeth's question first, because I do think that's where we left off. Elizabeth says she became a sort of friend to me. I ended up going to her funeral, and it was a huge loss to me. I'm so sorry. However, it reiterated my love for healthcare and the honor I felt to take care of someone so special. Basically, I was curious if that shows a lack of a boundary.
Not necessarily. So I know that okay, so you were just asking in general. So no, not at all. I think that would be something that would be great, maybe in one of your examples to speak about in your personal statement, because again, that's something that they're not going to pick up on just by reading your experiences in CASPA. And so I think that I would definitely use that. I had quite a few personal patient connections that I spoke about in my own personal statement. And I think that as long as you're abiding by HIPAA, and not like listing things like that, then I think that only makes it stronger, because it shows your ability to empathize and connect with your patients, which is huge and something that they're looking for.
It's a beautiful story as well, I think. One of those things that you don't forget. So the next question is, what HCE positions would you recommend?
Good question. So, there's direct patient care experience and then there's healthcare experience. All right. So, direct patient care, and I would have to pull up the CASPA application to tell you exactly, list all the different examples, but I will tell you I would do this 100% because sometimes you might think that you're getting the direct patient care experience, but it is only healthcare. And I think I saw that in another person's question that it was, they said that wasn't direct patient care. And that can hurt you because some programs will say it's a requirement that you have 2,000 hours of direct patient care. So really you have to know the difference between the two. And I think that direct patient care is going to be more like your EMT, your phlebotomy, your things that you're actually putting hands on the patient. But I think that you can also get by MAs in dermatology clinics if you're taking vitals and things like that. You'd have to go through and look. But I would say make sure your direct patient care experience is filled out first. So you asked, the healthcare experience, and I think that those are, there's a myriad of positions that you can do for healthcare. Scribing is fantastic. I think that's only going to help you as a provider long term. I was a scribe, and I think it has done wonders for my charting and my ability to kind of understand the medical terminology and lingo ahead of my peers in my PA class because of how long I scribed. EMT is great. Phlebotomy is great. A medical assistant is fantastic. There's so many different ones out there, but I would just make sure you're hitting the number of hours that you need to be hitting and that you're getting that direct patient care, because I think that's a big one that the programs are requiring now. The question, when you said that you're working as a physical rehabilitation aide, and I would. So if you know that you're not able to actually hit that direct patient care experience, and that's a requirement for some of the programs that you're applying to, I would try to see during your gap year if you could find another job where you'd be able to hit those hours. Absolutely. It's only going to diversify your profile, but also make sure that you are not disqualifying yourself from some of those schools because they're not, unfortunately, considering that as direct patient care.
Next question. How should students approach getting letters of recommendation from undergrad professors if they're planning on taking gap years? Really great question.
Great question. So I think that from the moment that anybody knows that they're going to start applying for PA school, think about in your head, who are you going to have for your letters of recommendation? And great people to ask are professors, especially professors that in some of your science classes. If you, got an A in anatomy and you got to know that professor really well, that's a great professor that you could ask to write you a letter of recommendation, and even maybe a physician assistant that you shadowed during that time. But if you know that you're taking a gap year, as I did myself, and you're going to start to lose kind of contact with those people, I would make a plan with a calendar notification every single, 9 months. You are reaching out to them with an email. Hey, how are you doing? Like, just kind of to keep maintaining that relationship there so that when you come to ask them for a letter of recommendation, maybe a year, 2 years from now, they're not like, oh, I kind of remember you, but they know that you've been making an active effort to kind of maintain that relationship with them, and they're happy to write one for you.
Awesome. So how many PA schools do you recommend somebody applies to?
So there's a lot of statistics out there on basically what the baseline number is for increasing your chances of getting in. And I think from what I remember, it's about 12. And I think that after that, going up about higher than 12 doesn't necessarily exponentially increase your chances of getting in. So I tell applicants it really is dependent on the applicant, but it is competitive. I will just be very honest. I applied to 20 programs myself, and I've got several interview invites, but I did it because I knew how competitive it was, and I watched other people not get interviews, and I didn't want to have to take another gap year. So I think it only helps you to apply to as many schools as you think you're going to be able to get into without obviously I don't think you need to apply to 30 schools, but I think applying to 12 is a good number to hit, and more if you can financially afford it.
Awesome. And do you think getting a CNA license is a good idea for direct patient care?
Yeah, absolutely. If that's one of the things on their that CASPA is requiring, and that is an area that you're lacking on your application, yeah, CNA is great. I think that don't feel like you have to go and get all of these licenses if you already have direct patient care. But if you don't have it, that's definitely a great one that I know some of my classmates had.
So I think speaking about CASPA, I think that's a really great segue into this next question. So if a person lists an experience under a PCE, but a few of the schools see it as a HCE and the rest see it as a PCE, so will the schools do their own categorization in the end, or how does that work?
So it's hard to say for some, like, it's hard to say. I know that there are programs out there that will list directly on their website, like, we don't consider this. And I think that's kind of more rare that I see that I would say generally I would follow what is on CASPA. You can search what CASPA is telling you is considered direct patient care, and what is they've got a whole FAQ section on their website, and I would look and I would try to stick to that as a general guideline to you. And I would also, keep in mind, again, this is by going by the unique requirements of every school you're applying to and making sure that you aren't going to disqualify yourself because you're listing it in one category or another. I can't speak to how every school is going to do it, but I would just say general advice is I would follow what CASPA is saying, and make sure you've read that program's website and you're not disqualifying yourself.
Awesome. Okay, so I don't see any other questions in the chat, but we have about 5 minutes or so left, so I'll give everyone just a moment to get those thoughts in. But I have a question for you, Madison. Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience that we may not have covered, whether that be about your own experiences, whether that be advice that you wish you could give your younger self who was going through this?
I think just, it's why I do this. I'm just passionate because I think that it can be really hard to get rejection letters, and it's a very competitive field, and it's hard to get into, but it's doable. It's like you have to break it down piece by piece and really be committed to do all of the work to build yourself up and make yourself a competitive applicant. And you're going to get interview invites if you do that, if you really put in the time and effort to position yourself where you're hitting all these things in these categories. And so I just try to say that to inspire people to not give up, especially if you've already been, tried during the cycle and didn't get accepted and you're a reapplicant. If you're a reapplicant, I absolutely would be putting that at the bottom of your personal statement. I would be saying, as a reapplicant, I've done this, this, and this, and this, and now I'm more prepared than ever to become a PA, and I'm ready to take that next step. So that shows determination. It shows that you care about the field. Don't give up. If this is really the career that you want to do, you can do it. It's a process, and you're already doing the right thing by joining one of these webinars to learn more about it.
I always say that. I think it's a huge step, especially spending a Wednesday night being here and listening to all of this. I think that already says a lot about all the individuals who are here and those who will be watching this recording as well. So I don't see any more questions. I think this would be a really great time to wrap things up. If you do have a question, do you want to just quickly get it into the chat? I want to make sure we get as many as possible and we utilize our time together. We'll just give everyone a minute, Madison.
No worries.
Don't think I see any questions.
Oh, there is one more thing I do want to mention that I didn't talk about.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Professional memberships. I do think that it can be really good for your application to join as a student member, maybe your state chapter for PAs. You type in the name of the state that you live in, the PA chapter, joining that as a student, or APA. It just shows that you're committed to the profession, that you're interested in networking, and you can also go to some of those events and network with people there, and it can be great for your application. And that's something that people don't always tell you, but PA schools really are looking to make sure that you are kind of joining APA, which is the big professional organization that all of us PAs most of us are a part of. So I would try to join those for your application as well.
Awesome. So we actually have a question. What are your opinions on provisional accreditations or programs on probation?
So I touched on this briefly a little bit earlier. I personally would not advise my students to apply to programs that are on probation. And it's nothing to say that, it doesn't happen and that some programs aren't going to recover from that. But I had a few friends at the time that I was going to PA school whose program actually went on probation when they were students. And what happens is, from my understanding, you graduate, but you're not able to actually take all of the exams and licensings to become a PA because you're not graduating from an accredited program. So you have to wait until that program gets accreditation status back to actually become a PA. So even though they had finished PA school, they actually couldn't, become PAs like all of us yet. And so it's kind of a big deal. So I for that reason, I do think it's important to look at the ARC-PA website, know the programs you're applying to, make sure that they are not on probation currently or not heading that direction. I think it might tell them when they're up for reaccreditation, but yeah, just pay attention to those things because that can happen to some programs out there with all the new PA programs that are starting to pop up, and you don't want to catch yourself in that situation.
Amazing. So I think this is a really great time to wrap up tonight's webinar. Madison, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. To our wonderful audience, hopefully you enjoyed this presentation. We'd love to come back. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, fill out that form, or all of you have our emails. So definitely respond to any of the emails that you would have received reminding you about this meeting. And we'll make sure we get Madison or somebody equally as intelligent and wonderful on our team to respond to those. So thank you again. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and we'll see you on the next webinar.